All right, let's get started here. Can everyone see my screen? Getting started with VS Code.
Yep.
All right, cool. I've had technical issues before, so I'm gonna be paranoid about that. If my screen share stops working, just let me know. But yeah, I just want to give you guys an overview of what the afternoon will contain. Chad and I are going to be taking over. We're going to be going through just a quick tour of VS Code. Some of you guys may have used it before, others have never seen it before. So we want to make sure that you guys can at least get up in coding, because you guys do have some coding exercises to tackle tonight. So VS Code should be something that you're familiar with enough to get coding. We're also kind of going to go over going the command line, just working with that. Again, if you're familiar with it, great. If you're not, we definitely want to make sure you know how to use the command line, and also GitHub to access the assessments or the challenges, and make sure, again, that you can get coding by the end of this lecture. And also by the end of today, as Tom kind of mentioned, the goal is to make sure everything's been installed and that you can run everything as needed for the rest of the cohort. So if you do have installation issues, Chad and I will be available after the lecture's over to kind of handle any issues that you guys might be having. So reach out to us if you're still not fully installed with all the applications, and we'll try our best to help you solve those after the lecture. All right, so yeah, I'm just gonna go over a quick brief tour. It's not gonna be too in-depth, but just make sure everyone knows how to use VS Code. So Visual Studio Code is an IDE for development. It's a great IDE provided by Microsoft. Again, you can totally code in a text editor, but why would you? The reason being, Visual Studio Code offers great features from like syntax highlighting to IntelliSense to just being able to debug your code, which is huge. So that's kind of why we recommend it. It's one of the better IDEs that I've used. I'm not quite sure why Microsoft has made it free, but it's got a lot of features, and it's a joy to use for development purposes. So yeah, again, that's what we recommend, and hopefully you guys get comfortable with it. So yeah, let's just take a quick tour of Visual Studio. I should have it pulled up here. Sorry, give me a moment. All right, here we are. So I just pulled up the Visual Studio Code window. Usually they want you to use a folder for your project. So you can definitely edit individual files in here, but I'm actually going to open up a folder. So let me close this and do it the way I intended. So I'm going to bring up my command window. All right, so here's my command window. I'm just going to, it disappeared. All right, so let's navigate to, I have a folder created. I'm just going to create a new one. Let's call it welcome. See, I'm a bit rough seeing my command line here. All right, so I just created a folder. Again, if you don't understand the commands I'm using, Chad's going to go over the command lines, so don't worry too much about that. So to open up a folder, I'm just going to write code and put a period after it, and that should open a VS Studio or VS Code window for me. And I'm in my welcome folder, so now I can create all my files here and run my project out of this window. So to start, I'm just going to add a new file. And again, if you guys are following along here, that might be a little easier just to navigate this. But adding a new file, and I'm just going to call it welcome.js. So that's going to create a JavaScript file for me. And basically, I can just start coding now. So I could write message. All right, so it's a very simple program, should print out hello world. So usually we use the in-house terminal in VS Code. So to bring that up, the command I believe is Control tilde, and that brings up my terminal at the bottom over here. So if I wanted to run my code, I'd type node welcome.js and print out my message as I expected. So that's just a very simple JavaScript program. We use Node, which is the engine to run JavaScript files, and we printed out hello world as we expected. So again, that's just a very basic way to create a project file or project folder, and then working in that project folder by adding files and running an application. So what we're going to do here right now is we're going to add a bunch of extensions to VS Code. So one of the things that makes VS Code so flexible is that there's hundreds of extensions that we can add. And this basically just makes our development life much easier. So we're going to go through the curriculum. I will need to pull up my window for that. Apologies here. I have my windows out of order.
Quick question, if I could just chime in for like just 1 second.
Absolutely.
Does it, do you have to choose the code that the coding language you want to type in, or does it kind of respond to every type of code language?
That's a good question. So when I created my file, the extension that you add will tell it what type of file it's going to be. So I typed .js, so it knows that the code I'm writing is going to be JavaScript. So if I started writing like C++ or Python in this, it won't really identify that. It might still work. Like I guess I haven't really tried that, but like the editor won't know it's JavaScript offhand or whatever. Like if I start writing Python, it won't know it's Python, so the syntax highlighting might not be correct. But I guess that's a good experiment if I could just write Python and run it as a Python file. But for the most part, the extension you add will kind of dictate what file, what type of code you want to write in there. Thank you for asking the question. I forgot to mention at the beginning, if you guys do have any questions about anything, feel free to interrupt at this point. Like this is definitely meant to be interactive and make sure you guys are following along. Sorry, I need to bring up my curriculum window. I can't find my windows. All right, so we're at my curriculum. Week 1. All right, so we went through all the install stuff. I'm going to be starting off down here at lecture topics. We're going to be adding some settings to VS Code. So if you guys want to follow along, basically I'm just going to copy this section here and then apply it to my VS Code. So to do that in VS Code, if you hit Shift, Command, and P, that brings up your, I guess, command menu. And here I'm going to say, type in open settings, and it should find it for me in this. So I'm just going to click that. And I already have my, I guess, settings already pasted in here, but I guess I'll just do it again. So let's delete those. So these are settings we recommend. You can tailor these to your liking. But for the most part, we kind of all want to be using the same style and get the same settings. It just makes it easier to kind of interact and share code with each other.
We got a quick question, sorry.
Go for it.
You said open settings. What settings? Because I'm getting 3 different options.
Sure. So the way I did it on a Mac was if you hold Shift, Command, and P, it should bring up a command menu. So let me do that again. It brings up this menu. So you get that to open?
Yeah, I got that part.
Okay. So then in that menu, you can just type open settings, and there should be a JSON option.
Oh, okay, JSON.
Yep. Sorry, I guess I didn't specify. But yeah, you want to use the JSON settings where you just type in stuff, and then paste in the stuff from the curriculum page, and that'll just set some defaults that we use. Right, cool. Again, these are recommendations. Again, if you want to change them, feel free to, but we recommend going with this for now. So once those settings are set, we can kind of just close this out, and that should apply.
I have a quick question on that.
Yep, go for it.
I have like a few hundred lines of code already in my JSON setting. Like actually, like 2,000-3,000 lines of code.
Okay.
It's not blank.
Did you go through some other installation process? Like, are you on Mac or Windows?
Mac.
Okay. That is curious. I'm not sure why it'd be pre-populated. I would say probably you could probably just leave those. But if you want to add this section in still,
okay,
inside the curly braces, that should apply it. But I don't want to break your settings. So if it's working fine now, we can kind of come back to that later and see. If
okay.
All right. So we've installed our settings here. We're going to add some extensions now. So these are, again, some recommended extensions. These just make your life easier. I'll talk about some of them. I actually don't know what all of them do offhand. But if you guys are following along, click on this tab over here, the extensions tab. on the far left, it looks like a bunch of cubes coming together. Here, you'll see a list of just a bunch of extensions that you can install or have installed already. So we're just going to go through this list. So the first one will be Sublime Text Key Map and Settings Importer. Again, I don't think I really use this. This is for Sublime users, which is another text editor. But you just type in the installation you're looking for. I already have this installed, but if you don't have the extension installed, you'll see these install buttons. So go ahead and just go through the list of extensions listed on this page. So we got Sublime, Text Key Map, and Settings Importer, Beautify, VS Code icons. That one just, it's a small UI thing, but basically it will show you specific icons based on the file type here. Again, it's minor, it's not required, but it's kind of useful just to know what files you're dealing with by just looking at the icon instead of having to inspect the I guess the file type name. So in this case, I can just look at this and say, okay, this is a Python file, this is a JavaScript file. So yeah, take a few moments to kind of install those. If you guys have any questions or have any issues, definitely stop me if I'm going too fast. Bracket pair colorizer, that one's really useful for me. Again, when you get into coding and start having nested brackets, it's really useful to kind of see which ones line up. So as you can see, I have it installed, so it's matching up my outer brackets in yellow, so I could just see, okay, these match up. You know, if you keep going nested, they reuse the same colors, but it's pretty easy to see, okay, this one lines up with this one. Obviously, they're on the same line, but if I had a lot of code here, just the coloring kind of helps. I guess it's more useful if you have brackets on the same line also. So if I just have like, I don't know, if I have S equals, and if I just keep like nesting brackets, I don't know why I'd be doing this, but it's just easier to see where the brackets start and end. So that's a useful extension you can add. Path Intelligence kind of just gives you some context menus that kind of autofill code for you and give you suggestions for functions. Sorry, someone have a question? Go for it, Andrew.
Yeah, there's two of them. Should we download both?
For which one? Sorry.
Bracket pair colorizer.
So yeah, I guess I should go through this a little. Usually I just go by the rating. So they usually have ratings listed and how many downloads. So brackets. I'd go with the newer version. I guess they have bracket pair colorizer too. I've not used that one. Again, feel free to use it. I'm sure it works just as well. I have the 1.0.61 installed. I think that's the original. And then, yeah, there's a newer one, I guess. I'm not sure.
I use
different.
I use two and it works just the same exact thing.
Yep. Yeah, I think it might just been some other author created this extension. So these extensions can be created by users, or Microsoft might create some default ones. But yeah, it's a lot of user collaboration. So you know, if you get the urge to create your own extension that you think might be useful, you could probably add it to the VS Code library. I'm not quite sure what the process is. I don't know if they had to approve it or you can kind of just add it. But
Ankur, I have a question.
Yep.
If we are held up at the node version manager step of the install best, should we still try and install the settings?
Yeah, I mean, so VS Code, if you have that installed, I think everything I'm going to be going over for the most part is just VS Code specific. So the other installations shouldn't affect the settings for VS Code.
Okay.
The only issue you might run into if you don't have like node.js installed, you might not be able to run a program.
Okay.
But again, we'll go after the lecture, just contact Chad or myself or one of the TAs, and we'll try to make sure your installations are up to speed. So I'm just going to give you guys another minute here to install these extensions if you guys want to. Live share and live share audio, we're going to actually go through a demo of this. But this is a great way to kind of collaborate, since obviously we're all in a remote setting. It's not easy to kind of look at the same code like over someone's shoulder. Live share kind of enables you to use the same coding window even remotely and kind of collaborate that way. So we'll kind of give you guys a demo of that.
Ankur, quick question. Sorry. I was catching up on trying to get everything downloaded. How am I installing these extensions?
Sure. Good question. So just go over that again. So if you have your VS Code open, on the side, you should see a bunch of these icons. If you go to the cubed, the bunch of cube looking icons, that's your extensions tab. Do you see that?
Yes. Okay.
So if you click on
Thank
that,
you.
you should have a search menu and then type in the names of whatever extension you want to add and install those. But yeah, that shouldn't take too long. I'm going to actually move on. So I think most people should have.
How do I uninstall the extensions? Like I forgetfully installed something else.
Mhm.
How do I uninstall them?
So if you want to uninstall, just click on the one you have. So for example, I have Beautify installed. Here you can disable
Oh, okay.
installation or uninstall it.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Good question. So yeah, again, I'm not going to do a great job of explaining all these extensions to you, partially because I don't know what they all do. But if you just click on the extensions themselves, they should have a good description of what they're offering and how you kind of use them more in detail. But all right, so after we got our extensions, let's just go back to our coding window.
Really quick,
So-
sorry.
Yep. Go ahead.
Where did you go to get this on the curriculum?
Oh, good question. So it's on the day one, week one, day one page. So the Monday, February 1st one. So if you go back to the curriculum, click on this link. So let's start from the top. So if you are on the main curriculum page, which is on the GitHub November Platoon curriculum, you see a bunch of weeks listed. I'm just clicking on week one, and then they have the days listed. You want to click on these files. If you click on these, it's going to show you like the changes that happened. Just click on the day that we're on, and then scroll about halfway down the page, and you should see lecture topics.
Okay.
Got it?
Yep, got it.
Okay,
Good.
okay. Yeah, I want to make sure I'm not losing anybody. Hopefully I'm not going too fast. All right, so we installed our extensions, so we're good there. I'm gonna leave this for Chad. Chad's gonna describe the command line, so we're gonna skip over that. But yeah, I'm just gonna give a tour of VS Code, as I said. So I created a simple JavaScript application here. I hello world, assign it to my variable message, and print it out. Just to go over how to run an application, as I said, you type in node for JavaScript, and this is the engine that runs JavaScript files locally, and then type in the file name. So my file name is welcome.js, and I just enter and it runs it. So that's the way to run your code files through the command line. Again, if you need to bring up the command line, you want to hit Control tilde, and that should toggle it. So if I hit it, it disappeared. If I hit that, it should come back.
I have a quick question.
Yep, Kyle.
So in order to run stuff from the command line, then what's this called? VS Code. You need to be in like a certain directory, what you're saving to.
No, there's no special directory, but when I did open up my VS Code, I did have a folder created. So you usually want to be working out of a folder.
I see. Okay.
Singular pass. Yeah, so I created a folder called welcome and then typed in code dot when I'm in that folder, and it opened up a VS Code using that folder.
I see.
But yeah, we can go over that later if you're still kind of stuck there. All right, so we ran our simple application. Again, nothing complicated going on here. So one way to run it, as I said, is through the terminal. However, this being an IDE, there's great features we can use for VS Code. So if you want to run it and actually debug your code, the way I recommend is basically going to the run menu and hit start debugging. So hopefully everyone found that menu. And then it's going to give you an option here. There's a few options that they're providing. Chrome, Edge, which is another browser. And you should also see a node.js. And again, if you didn't go through the full installation for Node, you might not see these. So I apologize if you guys are behind there. But what we want to do is select one of the node options. Hopefully yours should say node.js without the legacy option. I'm not sure why mine says legacy. It kind of popped up there. But if you select one of those, and then it should start running, and you should see your output here. But the key reason I recommend trying this way is because you can actually set breakpoints. So if you notice when you click on your editor, see this little red dot that appears right here? That's a breakpoint you can add. So if I actually put a breakpoint by clicking in this, I guess, gutter of my file, it should add a breakpoint, and it should be bright red now. So I have a breakpoint there. So if I run my application again, go start debugging and select no legacy, it's actually going to stop my program and let me inspect any variables that I might want to. So at this point, I've assigned hello world to my message variable, but I haven't printed it out yet. So at this point, I can look in my variables window over here. Hopefully everyone can see where I'm circling. This will kind of just give me data about my application. So in this case, it has my variable message, and it shows me the value of it. So again, this is a great way to inspect your program, see the state of your program during its execution. So right now my application is paused, and I could do, I could just investigate stuff in between. So let's say like I'm getting the wrong message, I could see like why it might be the wrong message. So like in case I want like message equals new message, that would change when I run this again. Sorry, I'm screwing up over here. I'll go to start debugging. And all right, so I select node legacy, it should break, and all right. So if you want to go to your debug details, you got to click on this pane with the little triangle and the bug by it. And this is where you can access all your program information. Again, they show you your variables. You could add watch variables, which means if you want to track a variable between like function calls, you can kind of track the state there. The call stack, this is like if you have multiple functions, it'll kind of show you which functions call which other functions. Again, we're not going to get too much into JavaScript at this point. But again, if you can see, like I updated my message to be a new message, and it shows the current status here. So if I actually had a breakpoint here, my message would be hello world at that point, because I have not executed that line yet. That's probably a better example. Let's see. All right, so I set my breakpoint on line 2 here. So at this point, I've created a variable and assigned hello world to it. And then it stopped on line 2 before executing it. And so at this point, I can see that my message value is hello world, actually. And so it's to get more into the debugging, you should see this menu attached at the top of your file. And these kind of let you control your execution. So if I hit the play button right here, it's just going to continue on until it hits another breakpoint. And in this case, I don't have any breakpoints, so my application will kind of just complete. If I want to take it line by line, you have your options to step over or step into. At this point, these are going to do the same things because I'm not really diving into a function or any methods. So if I hit step over, it's going to continue the program by one line, but not execute fully. So if I hit that, notice that this this trapezoid looking thing moved one step lower. So now it's executed line 2 and it's about to execute line 3. So if I look at my message value here, it actually updated to new message. So that's, again, that's kind of how you debug through application, especially when you're getting values that you don't expect. You kind of break it down line by line and kind of see, how your variables are changing throughout the execution of your application. Sorry, so hopefully I didn't go over that too quickly. Any questions on running the local debugger? All right, I'll take your silence as success. So if you notice, whenever I hit run debug, it's always asking me for what environment I want to go into. Usually you want to use the same environment each time. So you can actually set up a config file for that. So let me go over that process. So if I go to the debug menu again, which is on the left side, the bug triangle looking thing, I'm going to add a new configuration. So if you go to this menu next to the play button, you should be able to drop down that menu and add a configuration. So in this case, I'm going to select node.js. And I'm going to create, actually, that's not what I do. I'm going to add configuration and select node legacy. Now, this is going to automatically create a launch.json file. And it's going to have a bunch of stuff in it. I'm not going to edit it. It's going to be set up for what I want it to do. So I can basically close that file. We created this VS Code folder, and it has this launch.json file. Again, you don't really need to edit this unless you need to do something in particular. But now that I have this launched JSON file, I can just go to run when I'm on my welcome page and hit run, and it'll automatically run for me. It won't ask me what method I want to go through, whether it be Node or a browser window, for example. Does that make sense to everybody? So again, the launch JSON file just controls your default configurations for running your program through Visual Studio Code. Again, you don't need this file if you're going to run it through a terminal. You can just run node welcome.js and it'll run. automatically the launch JSON files for VS Code. All right, some other just quick features. When you open up a file through your VS Code Explorer, you'll notice that it's italicized. This means it's not actually pinned. So if I switch to another file, which let's say I switch to my welcome.python file, notice that it replaced the file that I opened. It kind of took it away and replaced it. If I actually want that to stick, the way to do that is you double click on the actual file and the italicized name will become unitalicized, which means it's fixed there. So now if I click welcome.js, it'll open up a new tab. And so again, this is italicized, which means it's temporary. If I actually want that to stay, I could double click on the name in the Explorer window or just double click on the tab and now they're fixed. So I can switch back and forth between them. All right. Any questions on opening files, running files, using breakpoints? I know I went over those kind of quickly. I guess I'll show one more breakpoint example because they can be useful for debugging. Got a for loop here. Run that 10 times and got iterates or increment my iterator. So I'm going to actually add, let's see. So I just added a for loop here, and basically I'm going to be printing out the values of I, which is my iterating value, out to the console. So pretty straightforward here, except I'm going to add a special type of breakpoint here. So I add a breakpoint. If I control click on it, I get some menu options for that breakpoint. I'm going to hit edit breakpoint, and I get this additional menu. I'm going to add an expression here. So this is called a conditional breakpoint, which means the breakpoint won't hit every single time I run this. It'll hit when during a special case. So in this case, I'm going to add in I equals, let's say 7. So I hit enter. And now if you notice, your breakpoint should have like an equal sign on it, which means it's a conditional breakpoint, not a normal breakpoint. So if I actually run this, it should break during execution. So I have my debug console open. If you notice, I printed out 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, but my breakpoint stopped when I got to 7 because that was my condition that I set. So I could investigate, again, if I had more complicated code here, I could kind of investigate what the state of my application is when I equals 7. But if I want to just continue on, I'll just hit the play button and then the execution complete. So I printed out 0 through 9 as I expected. So that's what a conditional breakpoints do. Again, if you guys have more questions about this, we can go over them later. But just wanted to show you how breakpoints kind of can help your debugging process. Anyone had a question?
Yeah, I got a quick question. So this is like a debugging tool, right? It's not for like production. Like you couldn't actually create code using that like conditional thing, right?
Yeah, the conditional breakpoint edit is just, for debugging only. It's not altering your code in any manner. Like when you compile your code or release it, the breakpoint won't have any impact outside of a debug mode. But good question to ask there. All right, so if everyone is good with breakpoints, I'm going to show one more advanced feature of VS Code, just to kind of give you an idea of what VS Code can do for you and how it makes development easier. Again, there's so much of VS Code. Obviously, I'm not going to go over all of that. And honestly, I probably don't know half of what VS Code can accomplish, but it's really flexible and really, really powerful. So just know that about VS Code. So the thing I wanted to kind of show you guys was adding user snippets. So snippets are basically pre-coded blocks of or sections of code that you can automatically add into your file, and just saves development time. If you're repeatedly adding the same code over and over, it might make sense to create a user snippet to save time. So to do that, I'm going to hit Shift Command P, which brings up my command menu. And in this, I'm going to type user snippets, if I can type correctly. All right, so I see an option for configure user snippets. So I'm going to click on that. And it gives me a bunch of options. Like if I want to create a C++ snippet, I'll select that option. In this case, I'm just going to create a global snippet. So a new global snippets file. And it's going to ask me for a name, so I'll call it Hello World, I guess. All right, so I created this template for a snippet, and it just gave me like this pre-filled, I guess, block of code. I'm going to delete some of the comments. I'm going to uncomment this. And now I'm going to edit this. So I'm going to name this Hello World. It's going to be a JavaScript snippet. I'm going to name it hello world. So that's how I access it. And then in your body, this is the code you actually want it to generate. So let's say I want so in this case, I want a line that creates a message variable and then assigns it to hello world. And then because I am already in double quotes, the way to use strings inside of double quotes is to use single quotes. So that's why I use single quotes here. Usually they're interchangeable. So we have that. And then I want to, let's say, print out the console. All right, so I have 2 lines of code here. Again, your snippet can be hundreds of lines of codes, again, if it's that reusable. But in this case, I've created this. Let me just add a description, create a hello world snippet. All right, so I'm just going to save this. And now I can kind of close this file. I'm going to go back to my welcome.js and delete everything I added. So instead of typing, creating a variable, assigning hello world to it, and printing out the console, suppose I want to do that often, I created a snippet for it. So I just type in hello world, and it brings this context menu up and it shows that hello world snippet that I added. So if I just click on that, it just automatically adds that code in. So that's, again, this is very useful for repeated code. If you find yourself adding the same type of code over and over, it's probably going to be beneficial for you to create a snippet for it and just to save your time. Again, you don't have to. It's just a convenient way to kind of do the same thing. Any questions on what snippets are or kind of how they make your life easier? All right, so that's a little more advanced topic of VS Code, but definitely a useful feature to get familiar with as you get more familiar with coding. I think the last thing I want to show you guys is something called live share. So when we were installing our extensions, hopefully you guys got to the live share audio extensions. Again, this is a great tool for collaboration, especially with all of us being remote. We need better ways to collaborate, so live share is a great feature to do that. Chad, are you free to live share with me?
Yes, I am. Sorry.
Right. Great. So
yeah, I'm ready.
I'm going to set up our live session. I'm going to invite Chad, and then we're going to be able to code on the same screen, hoping everything works accordingly. So to live share, again, if you install the extension, you should see this icon on the side. So I'm going to click that, and I have an option to share or join a live share session. So I'm actually going to invite Chad to join my session. So I'm going to click share, and then it's going to pop up a window in the bottom right. If the one caveat here, I guess I kind of jumped some steps here. You're gonna need a Microsoft account to use this feature. So I actually had to create one and log in with it. So if you click live share and click share, it might pop open a browser window, ask you to sign up or sign into a Microsoft account. So those are steps I already had done. Again, you might encounter this.
Hey, Ankar, sorry to interrupt. It didn't actually make me create a Microsoft account. I just needed a GitHub account.
Okay, maybe that works as well. Thank you.
I think there's 2 options. I think one is GitHub, one is Microsoft, but.
Okay, that's great to know. Yeah, so if you are anti-Microsoft and don't want to account with them, GitHub seems to work as well. Thanks for pointing that out. Sorry, I didn't actually know GitHub works. All right, so I'm going to invite a participant. So let me just back up here. All right, so when I hit share, I get this window, and it's going to start a session. Now it says I can copy this link and then send it to anyone I want to join this live share. So I'm going to actually message Chad on Slack and send him my invite. And then hopefully he'll be able to accept it. And let's see, I'm going to have. So it takes a little bit of time for the connection to get established. I think Chad will let me know if he gets any errors.
Just accepted it, so.
Yep. So if you look in my context here, Chad's icon turned green, and he's available now. So Chad, are you able to see my welcome.js file?
Not yet. Let me
All right.
try entering the URL directly.
But yeah, I did see that you connected, which is a good sign.
Question, Encore.
Yep.
When you use LiveShare, do they have access to just that file or that whole folder that you're in, the root folder?
They should have access to the entire folder, as far as I know.
Okay.
I guess we'll test it out once Chad gets connected. But it looks like you might only have access to launch.json. Is that correct, Chad? Do you only see one file?
Yeah, I don't actually see any files. I can see that I'm connected. You can try that again.
Sure, yeah, I think we're just learning together here. Apologies for any technical difficulties here, but hey, we're all learning. All right, so I'm gonna set up another share, not for this file.
Well, while you're doing that, I'll point out a couple of things that I've run into with students before. If you have a hard time connecting to another student session, you could one of you could be outdated on your package version for live share, so you might just need to go update it. And then sometimes just recreating a new invitation link, like killing your current session, making a new live share session usually fixes the issue. Just
yeah, so those are great suggestions, and I guess this is a great chance for us to introduce Chris. Didn't realize he jumped on this call, but Chris, if you want to introduce yourself, Chris is one of the instructors here, so he's a great resource, and I'll kind of defer to him for his introduction there.
Yeah, my name's Chris. I wasn't available to be around in the morning, but yeah, I'll be one of the TAs helping y'all with all of the different things. I have a background in a lot of different languages and IT, so I can fix computers and program them. So if y'all run into issues, you can reach out, DM me. If I'm around, I can help you fix whatever issues you're having. That's
All
it.
right. Cool. Thanks, Chris. Glad to see you here. All right. So we got our live share working. Sorry again for the technical difficulties, but I invited Chad. I sent him a link on Slack. He accepted the link, and I see him connected. And now we can both actually edit this file at the same time. We could discuss it. Like, you know, I might be like, hey, Chad, I actually forgot how to write a for loop. Can you write a for loop in my file?
I do love for loops.
So you can see his cursor. It shows who's typing. I could probably type at the same time, but that's usually not productive. So yeah, Chad's writing code for me on my own screen, which is kind of cool. Obviously, if we need to discuss anything, we can just say like, hey, what is this for loop doing? Or, you know, I kind of need help with this block of code. Can we talk about it? Another alternative, again, it's based on your preferences. You can also do a Slack call and kind of share your screen that way. I've done that with some students. Again, it's good to just have the same eyeballs on the same code rather than having, you know, two separate code windows up and trying to sync that up. Definitely more difficult. But yeah, so again, it shows you who's editing. You could probably, you know, you could have a whole party in your VS Code file if you want to, just invite a bunch of people and kind of collaborate that way. But that's kind of how live share works. Again, it's not too difficult. I know we had some difficulties there, but basically you click on your live share tab, you should see an option to join or join an existing session or create a new session with someone. And you just copy the link and send it over to them, and they should be able to join without too much hassle, hopefully. So I just ended my live session share, so I think Chad got disconnected there. But yeah, so again, that's another cool feature of VS Code. Makes collaboration just that much more easier over distances.
Hey, Ankur.
Yep.
I actually have a question about live share. When this file is being edited, this is still a local file, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Okay, so any saves would only go to your machine until you put it on GitHub.
Yep. Yeah. So everything being done is on my machine. It just gives access to someone else to edit if you trust them enough to.
Got it.
All right.
Thank you.
So that was kind of my just introduction to VS Code. I know it's kind of scattered, but hopefully you kind of got an idea of how to create a project folder, create files in there, and kind of get yourself running code. Again, we'll go over more details on running like JavaScript files or running Python files, but just wanted to get those extensions installed, show you how to run through the debugger and setting breakpoints. Again, definitely go over this again. If you guys have questions, feel free to message me personally on Slack, or we can discuss it in a future lecture if there's a lot of questions about it. So that's my tour of VS Code. Hopefully you guys are familiar with it enough. Let's go back here, did our tour. And all right, so the next topic I'm going to talk about is pair programming. So live share is kind of a good segue into that. Pair programming is something that we're going to have you guys do most weeks. And this is something that you might encounter in your professional careers also. So it's good to get familiar with the pair programming process. So we have a little comic here. Hopefully your experience isn't as bad as this. Sometimes, you get two coders and they kind of clash with their ideas, whether it be style comments. I guess in this case, they're arguing over indentations, whether it be spaces or how many spaces they are. Sometimes some developers prefer 2 spaces, some developers prefer 4. Again, this is minor detail, but hopefully that's not what your pair programming experience is like. So the main topic I'm going to talk about here is the driver-navigator relationship when you come to pair programming. So this is a paradigm where you have two developers coding on the same screen, and you have one of them assigned a driver role and the other assigned a navigator role. So the driver is the person that's going to be actively coding, and the navigator is the one kind of looking over someone's shoulder, or I guess in a remote sense, looking through LiveShare and kind of just reviewing the code as the driver types it and making sure that whatever the driver is adding is sensible to whatever the problem at hand is. So to get more into the role, as a driver, you want to verbalize what you're doing. So imagine you're actually driving a car on a freeway. You want to say, okay, I'm going to take exit 17 in 1 mile. And then your navigator should verify, is that the correct path to take? Or they might correct you and say, actually, we got to take exit 19. So in a coding sense, if I'm the driver, I might be like, hey, I'm going to be adding X to Y. Again, this is a very simple example. So I'm going to be verbalizing everything I'm doing. And this lets the navigator know where my mindset is at and what the code is doing. Going off of that, I'm also going to be verbalizing expectations. So I might say like, all right, when I combine X and Y, I expect the value to equal 42. And again, the navigator will be following along and be saying, if this is correct or is what is expected, or might be the wrong expectation that I have. And also as a driver, I want to know what our steps are going to be, like what our problem at hand is and what we need to do after, like we take exit 19, whatever, what the next steps will be. So I kind of know where the coding is going to take me. Then we have the navigator role. The navigator role is more passive. Again, they're kind of looking over the driver's shoulder and making sure that everything makes sense. So as a driver is saying, hey, I'm going to be adding X plus Y, the navigator would stop the driver if that is not what should be part of the design. And they'll say, hey, why are we doing this? And kind of question the driver if it doesn't make sense to the navigator what the code that the driver is writing is accomplishing. Also, the navigator should confirm or reject the assertions that the driver makes. So again, in our previous example, if the driver says, hey, I expect this code to equal 42, the navigator should say, actually, I think it should be some other value. Or they might say, yep, you're right. I think this should be 42 also. And overall, the navigator, their role is to guide development. Again, the driver's main focus is to code, and the navigator should make sure what they're coding is correct and kind of fact checking them as they're writing. So there's many benefits to pair programming, and there's also some potential drawbacks. So again, this is something that you're going to be doing. It's not something that you should do all the time or might work well in all situations, but it definitely has some tangible benefits. So just listing some of those. With pair programming, generally you get fewer mistakes and fewer bugs in your code. So you get more reliable code. And that's just from the sense that you have 2 eyes looking at the same code and you have someone verifying the code as someone else is coding. I don't do pair programming very often, if at all. I usually write my code myself. And I know I get into the habit of like, I know what my code is doing, so I assume it's correct. That's not the case usually most of the time, actually. There's always minor bugs that kind of creep into your code. So just having that extra set of eyes verifying everything you're doing just increases your reliability and quality of code as you're going. In a professional sense, and I guess even throughout this cohort, we have a lot of different backgrounds in terms of coding. Some of you guys have coded before, taken college courses. Others may have never coded before, like the pre-work that you guys did. So there's going to be that knowledge disparity. Pair programming is a great way to share knowledge, both in terms of like, let's say you're an expert in something and you have a novice paired with you. That novice is going to gain a lot of experience just from seeing how you code and seeing how you kind of design your code. But there's also other pairing techniques. Like even if you're both novices, you guys still have a different background. Like someone might be an expert in JavaScript while someone else might be an expert in React, for example. Just combining those 2 knowledge bases lets both of you guys benefit from each other as you're working on a project. And also fosters creativity. Again, when I'm coding alone, I generally know what I want to do and I've probably done something similar in the past. So I'm usually going to stick to the same, the same concepts and the same habit of solving a problem. But having that extra coder working with you, it kind of, you have more discussions and kind of can see other ways to accomplish the same task. So yeah, pair programming is great for creativity and kind of just making sure you have good quality of code and just new ideas hitting your screen. There are drawbacks to pair programming. Again, it depends on your situation. One of the main drawbacks that has been stated is the, I guess, employee cost. Let's say you're working for an organization. Obviously, if you have 2 employees developing the same code, you're having 2 resources for one project, whereas normally you might have individuals working on different parts of the code. So it can be a slowdown and I guess higher employment cost if you're pair programming. But with that said, it's not simply a 2-to-1 like trade-off. As I said, the benefits are you have better code quality, you have fewer bugs, so that time is saved later on. Because if you code up something and have a bunch of bugs in it, you're going to spend a bunch of your time fixing those bugs. And as opposed to if you pair program, some of those bugs might be caught earlier, so you don't have to spend that time later. So it's not a direct 2-to-1 time sync. It's much better than that in practice. As we kind of saw with the comic I had before, sometimes you might be put on a pair programming assignment with someone that you just don't collaborate well with. Either you guys have different approaches, maybe you have personal differences. Again, it might be, and it might happen in this cohort. Again, the key thing is be professional, understand you guys are trying to accomplish the same goal and kind of like adapt to one another. Like, again, I have my coding ways, someone else, like if I'm pair programming with Chad, he might have a different way of doing stuff. Again, with coding, there's usually multiple ways to solve an issue. So don't assume that the way you know how to do something is the correct way. Again, it might be the better way. Again, that's where that discussion, having that discussion with your pair programmer and saying, hey, I think this is a better way to do it. And here's the reasons why I think it's better. And then having that dialogue between you two can improve your code and improve that knowledge transfer that we talked about earlier. I guess another drawback that I can mention, it can be kind of draining and hard to stay engaged, especially if you're the navigator and just staring at code for like hours upon hours. Usually for pair programming, you want to rotate. You don't want to be the driver for the entire day. You want to maybe go for an hour or two and have the navigator kind of guide you and then switch roles so that the navigator can also tackle the code and you can be the navigator at points. So yeah, it's good to, take a break and not be coding for 8 hours straight and having that trade-off if you can. So yeah, that's, again, just an overview of pair programming. I don't know if you guys have done it before, but it's going to be something we're going to do often here. Both helps you guys learn and it helps you guys kind of just prepare for the real world. Like usually when you're new to a company, pair programming is a great way to get onboarded rather than kind of just like sticking you on a project, be like, hey, figure it out. It's great to kind of work with someone more experienced and kind of gain their knowledge through pair programming. All right, so that's the 2 main topics I want to talk about, VS Code introduction and pair programming. I kind of hinted at the command line, which I used a bit beforehand. I am not an expert in command line stuff, but Chad, I believe, is much better at it. So I think he's going to be talking about the command line and sharing his knowledge with you guys. So Chad, you want to take it away?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we should take a short break.
That sounds
yeah, so why don't we take a we'll come back at 2:30, so in like 10 minutes.
All right, see you guys then.